If you found this video, yay! I hope it's what you're looking for. Because it is, in a nutshell, the gap that is missing if you don't feel like reading. Okay, the Grave Robber Chronicles. There are pieces missing. And I have a video, a very short video, explaining why between the series is going to be very confusing if all you're doing is watching the series. That's kind of the initial first series, Grave Robber Chronicles, but when I use it, I refer to, like, the whole world. That's kind of what I mean. When you go to the TV shows, it's like Lost Tomb and Sound of Providence and etc., etc. So it can get really, really confusing. This is a big world, just in the books, just in the show, never mind both. But it is possible to get through it. I made it. Okay, so once you finish watching Ultimate Note, the next one to watch is Sansi, and what you're going to notice is a big gap. You're going to be going, huh? How did we get here? What? Why is everybody acting like this? This is very strange. And worse, I mean, like, Ultimate Note literally left you on a cliff. Because they deviated off and added that whole training ground, instead of actually going to the real place, they left you, like, hanging on this weird little irritating cliff, and then you're jumping over to Sansi going, huh? Tibetan Sea Flower happened, like, 3 or 4 years after the end of where Ultimate Note was supposed to, like, finish. So Tibetan Sea Flower, no matter where it goes from there, unless it weirdly goes in the other direction to connect that, you're still going to have Ultimate Note, gap, Tibetan Sea Flower, gap, Sansi. So, if you look up Domu Biji WordPress, it should come up. That is what I said. Read Domo BG WordPress, and exactly what I'm talking about is right there. It's the first thing that popped up as a suggestion. That is a fan translating these things. The original author, Zhang, puts all of this stuff up for free on a website, and then he tweaks it before he publishes it in a book. This fan started translating them and putting them up for free, and if you want to read the books, you'll find all of it on there. All of it. All of the stuff that Zhang puts out, this fan has put out. But if you are not interested in the slightest in reading the books, for whatever reason, it doesn't even matter why, but if you're not interested in reading the books, this video is what you can watch, and then continue with the drama and forget the books exist. There is slight weird deviation. Hopefully I worded everything so it makes sense, and if I didn't, it might be me, but it also might be because this is coming from the books. The drama's deviated. So, Wujier, this is picking up exactly where Ultimate Note left off. Wujier puts the mask on to become Uncle 3. And he is Uncle 3 for quite a while here, so I'll try to, make some kind of sign to remind you that this is Wujier, but everybody else is seeing Uncle 3. Xiaohua and Panza help him straighten out everything that's been going sideways from before the Heavenly Palace, bringing order back to Uncle 3's business, etc. All of that trouble that's been happening actually started happening before they even went to the Heavenly Palace. It's been happening for quite a long time now, and the drama didn't even refer to it until the end of Ultimate Note, basically. Whereas in the book, you kind of notice it a few different times. And, well, in the middle of doing all of that, which was, to me, incredibly boring and irritated, and I didn't want to read about that, I wanted to go save Qiling and Fatty. And while doing all of that, straightening out the business, Wujier is able to hire a team of people to head back for Benai. When they get to Benai, Chodaka wants to talk to Wujier, and even though Wujier tries to avoid him, they end up talking. One of Chodaka's men found Qiling's sword, on a body, but one that can't be identified, so Wujier definitely refuses to believe that Qiling is actually dead. This is when and where Wujier finds out about the gas that melts people. It melted the man that found Qiling's sword, i.e. the stuff that in Ultimate Note, Fatty shows Wujier can be blocked with the metal piece that Qiling had. This gas is one of the traps riddling the tunnels surrounding the Zhang family tomb. Chodaka wants to work with Wujier, who is about to cave in when Panza convinces him not to. Quotes from Dakao, "Well, you won't believe anything I say anyway. You have to go in before finding out what kind of place this ancient building is. I'll prepare 4 coffins and wait for you to sit down and talk again." Wujier and Ko head up to the lake. When Wujier takes Xiaohua and Panza to the place where Uncle Tu, who's actually Chodakao in the drama, in the book, it's Uncle Tu. where they rescued Wujie. They find a crack barely big enough for a bug to break through, but while standing there trying to figure out what's going on, they discover that Fatty is inside the crack. When they pull him out, he's covered in injuries, some of which they realize he did to himself. When he barely wakes up and talks to Wujie, who he instantly recognizes as being Wujie, not Uncle 3, though he doesn't tell him that until later because he doesn't trust Xiaohua. With all of the changing of the drama, they kept adding Xiaohua way sooner than he actually came in, and they kept kind of messing up their whole real first interactions and all that stuff. So, like, by this point in the books, Fatty actually barely knows Xiaohua, hence why not actually trusting him. So he doesn't want to say things in front of him when he doesn't know what Wujie is doing or why he's doing it, and of course he wasn't there to see that it was Xiaohua that helped him put the mask on. So because Fatty's out of it, and because he doesn't really know Xiaohua, he just stays silent here, and it's later that he tells Wujie that he knows it's him. Here, he instantly recognizes him but doesn't say anything. They find out that Fatty had drawn an extremely complicated map on himself that should lead to Qiling, Granny Huo, and the other people with them, all of whom were alive the last time Fatty saw them, but they are definitely in danger. Xiaohua and Panza, along with some others, go into the crevice to follow Fatty's map. Fatty properly wakes up after Xiaohua and Panza go into the tunnels. He tells Wujie the whole story of what happened. After they opened the third door with the wrong password, nothing happened. Qiling himself couldn't find any mechanisms, which either meant there weren't any, or they were way beyond his expertise. So they kept walking, and it came out of the tunnels into a valley, which made no sense since the path they were following looked like a straight line leading to the tomb. They couldn't find any other entrances, so they went back to the one with the password door, and this time came out a completely different exit, once again, not in the tomb. At this point, they realized the password must be wrong, and the reason they aren't instantly killed was a kind of protection for the Zhang's own ancestors, since mistakes can happen even among their own descendants, who they obviously don't want to kill. So they set a trap with some forgiving room for an oops. Fatty figured out what Wujie does. This means there has to be limited chances for oops, otherwise people would be able to go around and around for eternity, but Granny Huo decided they must have missed something, so they had to go back for a third time, and this was the time that changed everything. They reached a dead end. Qiling had checked every inch of the wall the whole way and couldn't find anything, so they turned around, but even going back had changed. Instead of finding the doors, they found a cave with several pools of water. But it's not just water. The cave ends up filling with poisonous gas that absorbs right into the skin, making gas masks useless. And since Qiling didn't find it, never mind Granny Huo, etc., even Fatty is starting to doubt Qiling's judgment. Ooh. They blocked the cave entrance to stop the poison, and with Granny Huo's authority, calmed everyone down, and they searched all over the tunnels without finding an exit. They even used explosives, but couldn't find the exit or the mechanisms trapping them. So finally, with everyone but Qiling and Fatty exhausted, they tried splitting up. Quote from the book. Qiling put on gloves, fastened his sword securely to his back, and entered the cave. After that, he didn't appear again. One of them went to check on the situation and ran back after only 3 minutes, saying that Qiling had disappeared. Everyone was devastated. Fatty went out to check one pool of water after another, only to find that Qiling really was missing. This professional missing person really lives up to his reputation, I said to myself. A lot of things happened later, and the poisoning became worse and worse. Eventually, I passed out, Fatty said. When I woke up, I found all the people around me were gone. This is when Fatty goes down the tunnels on his own and finds a different cave with water in it, and in the water, a mirror. In the mirror, Qiling, Granny Huo, and everyone else resting inside of a room that had to be inside the Zhang family tomb. Fatty goes wild with his explosives now and manages to find one of the rock monsters and follows that path to the crevice where Wujie and Co found him. Wujie, while trying to figure out why Qiling didn't say anything and instead left Fatty behind, since he's positive Qiling should have figured the trap out from past experience, even if he couldn't find it with his fingers, ended up deciding, quote, the only reason Qiling wouldn't bring Fatty into the ancient building was because he knew this was a journey of no return. With Qiling's skills and energy, if he determined that this was the case, then there definitely wasn't any chance of survival. Qiling thought they were going to die, but he brought Granny Huo and the others in. Did Qiling think it was okay for them to die? He and Granny Huo had a lot of memories I knew nothing about. Moreover, the old woman still chose to come here even though she was in her 90s. It seemed that their respective problems were so big that they had to be solved, even if it resulted in death. Next big thing that happens is an attack on the camp. i.e. sloped shoulders, literally throwing bombs at them, and more importantly, he's purposely destroying the crevice that Fatty was pulled out of, which means Xiaohua and Panza are now completely trapped. And since there's no way Wujier is leaving 3 of the most important people in his life trapped in this place, the only option left is to head for the original entrance with the password doors in it. So Wujier, Fatty, and Co. start over the mountain. Along the way, Fatty finally reveals that he's known this whole time that Wujier is not Uncle 3. Jinxu brings up the fact her family is in a rather unstable situation considering her brothers have been unhappy for years because of Granny Hua's favoritisms towards Xiaohua instead of them. And then while the team is resting, ta-da, turns out someone else is in the mountains. There being another difference because in the Ultimate Note drama, Jinxu got sent away. Granny Hua sent her away, but in the book she's there. I don't remember when and how she came, but she's there. Part of Chou Dakao's team being led by a new guide, whose voice sounds very familiar to Wujier, who figures these guys must have set out to explore the mountain before Wujier and Co. reached Benai, and in the end Wujier and Fatty decided to spy on them. And guess who the guide is? Wujier himself. Wujier thinks he's seeing things, but in the end Fatty sees the other Wujier too, and with maneuvering and tricks, Fatty manages to grab the fake Wujier, and he and the real Wujier run away with him to have a chat. And continue to remember that the real Wujier looks like Uncle 3 right now. Fake Wujier is insistent that he's real. And since Fatty and Wujier can't seem to pull his mask off, suddenly Fatty's looking at Wujier suspiciously. Though he decides to stick with his first instinct and trust Wujier/Uncle 3. Fake Wujier, who is thoroughly tied up, then says he'll talk if Fatty goes away. So Fatty goes away and fake Wujier starts talking, but most of what he spins out Wujier doesn't believe. So the fake tells him proof is in his pocket, but when Wujier reaches for it, the fake attacks him. When Wujier wakes up, he's thoroughly lost, and in the process of trying to find Fatty, he instead finds Sloped Shoulders, who, because he thinks Wujier is Uncle 3, calmly takes him back to his cave for a chat. This guy knows Uncle 3. He was there with the archaeology team before and after everyone thought he had been killed while trying to get into the Zhang family tomb. He's actually been living on the mountain this whole time, stopping everyone else from getting in there. He literally has a pit full of dead bodies, and says, quote, "They're dead as soon as they enter the building anyway. Rather than die in that horrible place, they can die by my hands." And then he says weird things that Wujier doesn't understand, and the whole chat's interrupted anyway when Wujier realizes that Fatty is currently in the pit. Sloped Shoulders didn't kill Fatty, since he saw him with Wujier/Uncle 3 earlier, and lets him out of the pit. When Sloped Shoulders, who I'm going to call SS from now on, asks Wujier what he's really doing there, Wujier tells him his nephew is trapped in the tomb. SS says that everyone that goes in the building dies, but Wujier won't believe him, so SS takes him and Fatty to a completely different tomb entrance. A hint at how powerful the Zhang family is. In order to build the tomb in Benai, they literally burned the mountain and planted the kind of trees that would give them the wood they wanted 1,000 years before building the tomb. And on top of that, to get the wood down to where they needed it, they needed a tunnel, which was made with rainwater and a copper ball. Quote, "The copper ball was very heavy, so when rainwater was concentrated in this hole by the ironware, the rock below decomposed and became brittle. The weight of the copper ball itself would crush the whole rock. So for nearly 1,000 years, the copper ball had been sinking continuously until it finally penetrated the dome." On top of these things, one other key that made this location stand the test of time is the monsters in the mountain. The tattoo on Qiling's body is a refined version of the map that is basically trapping these monsters in the mountain. Ancient people that originally came up with the tattoo seem to be raising them, and the Zhang family took over to utilize them as part of their family tomb's protection. Honestly, the tattoo on Qiling, the author has had a few different stories of how it came into be and what it was and etc. They're slightly contradictory, but this is cool, and it's what it says here. Quote, "They can also form rocks themselves. There are 2 kinds of rocks here, the real rock that already exists and the rock that forms after their secretions solidify. The stone formed by this secretion is exactly the same as the original stone here. They devour and corrode the rocks and then fill in the gaps with their secretions like concrete. With this method, the whole mountain is basically like a huge jelly. They can move slowly in it since the rocks are like liquid, but this method is only effective for sedimentary and metamorphic rocks. They can't advance when they encounter igneous rocks. Probably said that wrong. Another way to stop them is to pour strong alkali on the stones. Does it mean that the rock walls around this ancient road are covered in strong alkali? Although we can't see the Miluto inside, they won't come out? Fatty asked. I, Wujier, shook my head. Wouldn't the rain wash it away after all these years? When it rains, the mountain roads become a diversion canal. There's an alkali seam at the top of this mountain, and all the rain washed down from the top is introduced into this diversion canal. As you can see, these mountain roads look very strange. Since the rainwater flows very slowly here, these mountain roads were designed to accumulate a lot of water. So there will be countless pools of water when the rain flows down the mountain. After these pools dry up, the alkali substance will cover the rock surfaces. But does this have anything to do with what you said about everyone definitely dying when they enter the Zhang family's ancient building? I don't know if you've ever gone fishing, but there's a very common phenomenon in fish ponds. When bait is put into a crowded pond, all the fish will be attracted to it and gather by it. After the Muluto, my word, I'm butchering that word, I'm sure, were put into the mountain, that ancient building was surrounded by rocks covered in strong alkali. It can't be breached, but the Muluto will be attracted by the heat emitted by whoever is inside and crowd around the building. More specifically, they'll all crowd around the entrance. Buddy, you mean to tell me that everyone will be trapped to death? Probably so, but the situation is worse than you think. If there are too many Muluto gathered around, the ancient building's mechanism will be activated. A large amount of strong alkali water will flow down from the top of the cave, forming a mist that will flood the entire building and force the Muluto gathered around to retreat. The whole area will be covered in a strong alkali fog. Nobody will survive. This is one of the traps surrounding the Zhang family building. And what they showed in Ultimate, this whole scene here with these things, those should have been Muluto, but the trauma changed them for some reason. So that's why I included that whole section there, to show you how much more cool it is than what the TV showed. Really? This? That's way cooler. After all this talk, it's here that Wujier and Fatty find out this guy's name is Zhang Qiling. That there are a bunch of them found back then, and only this one guy stayed, and when he hears more about our Qiling and the fact that he's one of the ones inside the tomb right now, he suddenly says, "You've made the biggest mistake of your life. You'll soon lose the key to unlocking all of these secrets, the only key." And in the end, he ends up telling Wujier and Fatty how to get into the tomb, not to help save Qiling, but to kill them. Because he's still of the opinion that none of these secrets should be revealed to the world. As he sees them off, he literally says, "Please take care of yourselves and don't come out alive." Now I'll skip through stuff because this is long and super hard to explain. Wujier and Fatty get chased by a slightly different monster, find the mirror but nothing is showing in it this time. They end up inside of a tall room that turns out to be like a giant flare that they accidentally set off and almost burned to death in. When they escape that, they end up in a pool of quicksand that's full of bugs and a giant mountain monster, and they barely escape from that, through a door that finally takes them to the Zhang family tomb itself. Quote, "With just one glance, we immediately found that we were still in a cave in the mountain, but as soon as we turned around, we froze. There was a huge ancient building standing behind us. The ancient structure looked very old in the dark, its dull gray appearance like a fossil that held countless unspeakable secrets. The whole building was dark, and there weren't any light sources, so the atmosphere seemed kind of ominous. I never thought that the Zhang family's ancient building would be so huge." When they enter the building, the floor number 1 is a big wide open space with nothing but 4 pillars in the middle of it. Qiling and Co.'s equipment spread all over the floor, and a lot of white powder covering everything, otherwise known as strong alkali dust that burns on touch. Worse, because it's easy to stir up as they walk, they're in danger of going blind. It takes them forever to find the hidden stairs in the pillar, so much powder stirred up by this point, even with covered mouths, Fatty is coughing up blood. Floor 2 contains iron figurines which Fatty, Qiling, and Wujier saw before, but Ultimate skipped showing. I think they're saying the figurines were used while the place was being built to trap the mountain monsters. A lot of the figurines had been moved out, but with so many, a lot got left behind in the tomb itself. That's Wujier and Fatty's guesses. On this floor, they also find a bunch of footprints they guess belong to Qiling and Co. that whole them being trapped in that cave, there was a lot of stuff that happened that the drama completely changed or completely skipped out on. There's actually 11 floors, including the one buried in quicksand. 11 floors on this building. When they look at the ceiling, there's more patterns like on the first floor, and here's another cool quote. Quote, "It seems that my theory is correct. As the most primitive tomb raiding family, the Zhang family may be the only ones in the whole world who know China's true history. They sealed all the secrets they brought out of their tomb robberies into this building. These strange characters should all come from the fragments of Chinese civilization that have already been destroyed. If my, Wujie's, guess is correct, the closer to the top floor we get, the closer we get to the modern times. Some of the secrets of Chinese civilization should be on that huge bottom floor, but it's already been completely buried in quicksand." They find the stairs and go to floor 3, where they find a black tortoise body with a human face. It's more complicated than Ultimate Note showed us, but more importantly, Fatty and Wujie are not only impressed that the Zhang family knew its deep ancient history, but also that they knew where to find it and that they managed to bring it to their own family tomb. They figure there are things from other ancient tribes on this floor, too, but before they could explore, Fatty coughs hard enough to fall over, even more blood on the floor. They decide to head for the stairs, but they find a string of footsteps that keep turning into clusters, like someone is walking around and stopping to look at something, which is weird, because there's nothing else to look at. Suddenly, they hear footsteps, and after a minute, they realize it came from above them. So they look up, which is how they discover the tens of thousands of boxes hanging from the ceiling. They shoot some down to see what's inside. Yeah, just go and destroy things, guys. And discover that it's all hands. Zhang family members' telltale hands with the 2 long fingers. Some of them so old they're bones, and some of them much, much newer. And they figure, for many different reasons, if the whole body couldn't be brought back to the tomb, the Zhang family would bring just the hand that would identify the body as a Zhang member. I think when the family tomb was moved, some of the less important people also only came as a hand. Because yes, I forget where or when, did Ultimate Note mention it or not, the family tomb itself, the entire family tomb, was moved at least once. At least once? Wujie and Fatty head up to the 4th floor, where they find corridors with many locked rooms lining them, even their windows covered with black paper so they can't see inside. Since they're afraid to kick the door down in case a whole lot of alkaline powder gets stirred up, they poke a hole in the paper in one window, and Fatty throws a couple of little flares inside, which lets them see that the room contains a coffin. I.e., this is the floor where the bodies that made it back in one piece have been buried. There are also wooden tablets all over the walls that tell the life story of the coffin's contents. Wujie estimates that there's about 1,000 rooms on this floor. Wujie remarks, quote, "Throughout history, as long as a family could prosper for 3 generations, there would be tens of thousands of people all over the world by the 3rd generation. The Zhang family had a special status, and its rise and fall weren't affected by historical changes. I'm afraid the family was even larger than we think. Those who could get a small room here were probably all very prominent members of the family." And Fatty can't help deciding, quote, "Man, it's a good thing little brother's generation has dementia. Now we don't have to worry about China being occupied by them." But in the middle of Wujie and Fatty discussing all of this, Wujie suddenly asks, "Do you smell something strange?" Dude, Wujie and Fatty cannot be left alone. The flares Fatty tossed into the coffin room started a fire. While trying to put it out, they end up accidentally knocking the door down, which falls on the fire, which puts it out, and thankfully it turns out there isn't any alkali powder on this floor. Quote, "First off, I was sure that the Zhang family had always been active in northern China. Almost all of their birthplaces and activities were there, mainly near North Korea and Changbai Mountain. In ancient China, that place didn't belong to the Central Plains, but was more controlled by ethnic minorities. The Zhang family was probably a large Han family mixed with other nationalities, so if they wanted to live in a place like that, it was clear how powerful they were. Second, I was sure that there were many branches of the Zhang family. For example, the branch where this person belonged was called Zhang. Even though all of these families belonged to the Zhang family, they formed branches because of their large numbers. In this case, the Zhang family had 5 branches. Moreover, I could see from the text that Zhang was a very important branch of the Zhang family. because they carried the Qiling. I still didn't know what the metaphor meant, but I could vaguely guess the key point. And also, another layer to the building process of this place, Wujier realizes here that, quote, the underground water system here was very rich and the interior of the mountain was very humid, so it had a considerable corrosive effect on the wooden building. The quicksand layer we passed through before was a moisture barrier to prevent water vapor from rising. I estimated that there was more than one layer of quicksand underground, and even though our feet had reached the slate layer underneath the quicksand, there might be more quicksand underneath that. And then after Wujier and Fatty opened the coffin, another quote. The dagger's sheath had completely rotted. The stones on it looked like red cherries and green raisins. When I pulled out the dagger, I found that it was a short black and gold knife. It was slightly shorter than Qiling's blade and was different in shape. It glowed black under the flashlight and looked extremely sharp. The handle had also badly decayed, so I grabbed the sharp edge of the blade, knocked the handle against the coffin plate, and broke off the rotten pieces. I was just about to throw it back into the coffin since there wasn't much left, but Fatty immediately stopped me and said, "Don't be like that. You went to a lot of trouble to get something, and now you're so picky. Take it. Take it out and make a new handle as a birthday present for little brother." "Do you even know when his birthday is?" I asked. Fatty took the knife, wrapped it up, and put it in his backpack. "I guess even he doesn't know when his birthday is," he said. "Just pick a sunny day and tell him that it's his birthday is coming. With his character, he won't ask what a birthday is." I felt a chill when I thought of Qiling blowing out birthday candles. It would be like seeing a ghost blowing out a lamp, and tried not to think too much about it. Putting the coffin lid back on is when Wujier sees a family tree and realizes the Zhangs are a closed family, i.e. they intermarry. They go to the next room but don't find much more, so Wujier leaves this room, but while walking down the corridor they find a door already open. This room is bigger and decorated quite differently, more like a presidential suite, as Wujier puts it. The coffin is also already open. But even though they first think it must have been Qiling that opened it, they realize from the amount of undisturbed dust that no, this room and coffin had been opened and left open for more than a decade. Maybe it was the archaeology team? Wujier turns to find out who's in the coffin and discovers that it's Zhang Qiling. But he was only called that from the age of 19 onwards, which is when Wujier realizes that that name is not just a name, but a title. Very likely the title given to the person in charge of Zhang family funerals. When they look inside the coffin, they find expensive burial objects still there, but imprints of 3 things that were taken away. 2 of them look like rings, which I'll tell you now are what Qiling took out to give Cho Kao. Wujier sees them later, but the author doesn't describe them, and Qiling doesn't explain what they're for, just that Kao was happy. Finally happy. Beats me. Anyway, Wujier and Fatty then realized that the other item that was taken was very likely the ancient sword that Uncle 3 sold to Qiling in the first book. I'll say now that yeah, it was definitely that sword, but it wasn't the archaeology team that stole it. I don't remember where I read it, or if it's 100% confirmed, but it seems to be pretty certain that Black Glasses is the one that took it out of the tomb. So, all you people who watched Ultimate Note and saw Black Glasses as nobody but a comedic relief, now you know why I'm a little irritated that he was nothing but comedic relief in that entire thing. Insulting Xiaohua and Black Glasses with nothing but comedic relief. When Black Glasses was inside the Zhang family tomb, took something and made it out alive. Wujier and Fatty look at the family tree on the coffin lid and discover that Qiling's original name was Rutong. The Qiling in this tomb, not our Qiling. Rutong. The guy had 6 kids, 2 of which also had kids, and when they look at Rutong's grandkids' names, they see the name Zhang Jishan. And to quote it all, since we just watched Mystic 9, we being me and my sister had just watched Mystic 9, so I'll quote it here. Quote, Zhang de Foyer was one of the top 3 in the Mystic 9 and led the largest of the 9 families. He robbed tombs at an early age, joined the army in the middle of his life, and engaged in politics during his later years. Zhang de Foyer, otherwise known as Jishan, was one of the few people who could do great things in the Mystic 9 and also cherished all of China. That was why people always sighed with emotion when they heard the older generation chatting about his legends. I had always suspected that he had something to do with the Zhang family's ancient building. When Zhang Defoe moved to Changsha from the north, he appeared to be a member of the relocated Zhang family branch that had been scattered by the Japanese at that time. So, this Zhang Qiling, in other words, Zhang Rutong, was Zhang Defoe's grandfather. Sure enough, the first family of the Mystic Nine really was the Zhang family. As if any of us doubted that. But anyway, unless you've watched the show. If you watched Mystic Nine show, you might have doubted it because they're rather pathetic. Sorry, sticking to the timeline here. Then Fatty asks how Rutong died. Wujier looks at the tablets. Quote, unlike the previous two who died in a firefight, this Zhang Qiling died of illness. In his life record, he suffered from loss of soul during a fight. What is lost soul syndrome, Fatty asked me. I took a deep breath. Memory loss. Wujier and Fatty are in Rutong's room for a while, and when they come out, they smell more smoke. They run back towards the first room and find a huge fire burning. As in, more than a dozen rooms are on fire, blazing right across the corridor. These two! The two of them somehow put the whole fire out. Some rooms only partly damaged, while several of the first rooms are entirely gutted. Wujier's guess is that the black paper on the door window of the first room they were in must have caught fire. Fatty's comment, quote, I say, the building designer should have put a few fire extinguishers here. This large wooden structure is a fire hazard. Yeah, when you two are around anyway. My word, I can't believe these. And then they smell something weird again, but this time it's not another fire. It's a body. The fire burned the ceiling and a body fell through. One of Qiling's team members, already dead when he fell. Fatty goes up through the crack first and finds the whole team, but tells Wujier, quote, don't come up yet. You might not be able to accept the situation. Over 10 minutes later, Fatty pulls Wujier up. Quote, basically everyone is dead. Which words Wujier misunderstood to believe that everyone is dead. He said, basically everyone, not everyone. But Granny Huo is definitely long gone. The whole scene is ugly, and when Wujier finds Qiling in the corner, he has an almost complete breakdown before realizing that he's wrong. Not everyone is dead. Oh, that breakdown. A bunch of them are almost dead. Qiling is still alive. At which point Wujier almost kills Fatty for scaring him so badly. But yeah. Basically, this area has less poison in it, and the team blocked as many crevices as they could, but they literally have been there so long it's useless. Then they realized that Qiling had a team and Granny Huo had a team, the two separating for a while. Granny Huo's team trapped here first, with Qiling coming after. Hence why some are long dead and some are still dying. This part is a big trigger warning. The shows even are like 16 at the youngest and like maybe up to 18. The books are without a doubt mostly 18 plus. Qiling's temperature is so high that his whole tattoo is showing, but aside from that, he's definitely doing better than anyone else in the room. How? Fatty explains, quote, he first made his body very weak and went into a deep coma so as to slow his heartbeat. This in turn slowed his blood circulation. And wrapping yourself tightly with your clothes to minimize the contact area between your skin and the air can reduce the degree of poisoning. This must be why, out of all the people here, only he had the lowest degree of poisoning. But there's more. How did he make himself weak? Fatty points to Qiling's hand and then turns it over to show Wujier. Qiling has wounds on both wrists. If you want to be weak, you just need to bleed. Time for one of the hardest moments of Wujier's life. Deciding not only do they have to leave everyone but Qiling behind, even though some of them are still alive, knowing that they won't make it back in time to rescue them. But also, Granny Huo. For Juju's sake, for her whole family's sake, and even for Xiao Hua's sake, since it was him that brought Granny Huo here, they need proof that she is actually dead. The only way Wujier can figure out how to do this without bringing her whole body back is to bring just one part of her back. That part being her head. Fatty helps him cut it off and put it in a backpack. When they get back to the first floor, they realize Qiling came through a different door than them, but it's hidden inside of a pillar, and they try, but cannot find it without his help. Thankfully, he wakes up just enough to find the door and tell them how to open it before he passes back out. The door leads them down to a room where they find the real entrance to the tomb. Wujie says, quote, "It seems that this may be the original form of the Zhang family's ancient building. The oldest Zhang family tomb may not be a building, but an ordinary tomb. Later, after the wooden structure of the ancient building was erected, it was preserved by future generations as the lowest underground palace. The Zhang family's oldest ancestors are all here. The ancient building we were just in wasn't actually a grave in the formal sense, but entering here felt different. Not only was this the tomb of the Zhang family's ancestors, but it was also the tomb of the old-timers who were much better than us. It was disrespectful to disturb them, so we kowtowed in front of the tomb. And then I asked Fatty to take out his cigarettes and do everything he could to follow the rules. According to the northern sect's rules, when entering an ancient tomb, one had to burn incense to pay homage and receive forgiveness from the tomb owner. This showed the tomb owner that the grave robber was poor, his mother was seriously ill, and his wife was forcibly robbed, so he had to rely on his windfall to survive. Fatty certainly spoke more eloquently than that, saying that the descendants of the Zhang family were unreliable, the GPS, i.e. Qiling, was out of power, we were lost and couldn't find our way out, etc. When they finally go through the door, what they find causes Wujie to say, quote, "The Zhangs seemed to really have a good foundation. If their ancient building was Yang Shilei's best work, and they had to smash through the stone here, then this project was obviously much more difficult than the building above. Moreover, these stones acting as the bottom foundation means that the building above is much more resistant to earthquakes. On top of that, its resistance against the mountain monsters, because it's made of the kind of stone they can't pass through. They find many coffins, some small, some double coffins for couples, a lot of writing Wujie won't let Fatty look at. Yes, you heard that right. Now that they have Qiling back, Wujie wants out of this place. And a stone gate with large black pillars on each side. Fatty and Wujie can tell the pillars have some kind of trap in them that someone already stopped, but can be released again if they touch it, so they don't. Through the stone door, they find a room with a bunch of boxes and a very oddly placed coffin. Not only is it tilted oddly, it's upside down. Is it the one the archaeology team wanted to take out? Fatty says they should open it. All the answers Wujie wants might be here. Instead, they find a weird corpse that turns into a weird zombie, and by the time they're done with that, Wujie says, forget it, whatever's written in the coffin, they leave. Next room, they find more traps and more mysteries, but realize that this whole old tomb is literally surrounded by the quicksand. Another layer of protection, since it would make digging a grave robber's tunnel into it impossible. They find an exit inside of water, but just before they're about to leave, they realize a poisonous gas mechanism was triggered, and they really have to run for it, already affected and barely making it out, only to find themselves in a cave full of ankle-deep water and crisscrossing threads with dozens of bronze bells hanging on them. If the cave is flooded with water, you can swim around them, but they can't trigger the water, so they're stuck. But at least they're safe for now, right? Not according to Qiling, who wakes up just enough when Wujie puts him down to whisper danger. Fatty the first one to see the poisonous fog coming towards them. Fatty makes it through some of the threads but sets off a bell, which Qiling stops from ringing, tells Wujie to keep going. Fatty runs ahead and somehow makes it through. Wujie hands Qiling to him and tells Fatty to go ahead. He leaves, and while Wujie is trying to prepare himself to keep going, he hears someone groaning. When he looks around with his flashlight, he discovers it's Panza. As it turns out, not long after he and Xiaohua came into the tunnels, they were attacked by a giant mountain monster. Everyone but Xiaohua and Panza were killed. I didn't mention earlier, while they were first going into the tomb, Wujie and Fatty found Xiaohua's cell phone, and there was a little video on it. So they've been worried about him ever since they found that. Everyone but Xiaohua and Panza were killed, but Panza didn't really make it away clean either. He is currently stuck inside of a rock. Wujie says he'll save Panza, but Panza says forget it, that's impossible, and instead urges him to leave, and then proceeds to shoot the bells in order for Wujie to make it through them, singing a song of courage while doing it to keep Wujie moving forward. And just as Wujie makes it through the poison-filled cave, One last gunshot silences Panza. Wujie finds Fatty and Qiling, and after running through some more tunnels, they finally make it out. Chodokao's team rescues them. Wujie is mostly out of it for a while, but he knows Chodokao's men found Xiaohua, based on Panza's words of where he should be, and the Jie family come to take him away for treatment. Granny Huo's head is gone, and people say Juju had a complete breakdown when she saw it. And while the Huo family and the Jie family seem to be okay thanks to her head being there, a lot of people now hate Wujie. Days later, when Wujie is finally able to get out of bed, Qiling is in the middle of leaving. He tells Wujie that he has to go and finish what needs to be finished before he runs out of time, and that it's too dangerous and has nothing to do with Wujie, therefore Wujie isn't allowed to come. Period. This is actually where Yunsai dies. Shot, washed up in the river, Wujie can't handle any more grieving and leaves Fatty behind to cope while he himself heads back home. Except the home he goes back to, for now, is Uncle Three's home, and that leads to a bunch of mysteries that partly answer some questions about stuff, but also make a lot of things way more confusing, and I don't feel like skimming them right now. So if you want to know all of that, you really will have to go to the book. In the end, as Uncle Three, because remember, he still looks like Uncle Three through all this, as Uncle Three, he sets up a story for Uncle Three being gone, and some of his businesses are being handed to Wujie while he's away. Wujie finally gets to take Uncle Three's mask off and cries when he sees his own face. It takes him a while to get used to being himself again. About 3 months after he gets home, he has a funeral for Panza. Fatty stays in Benai for a long time. I forget how long, but it's a few years. But just as everything seems to be normal again, ta-da! Qiling shows up in Wujie's shop. Only his words are incredibly solemn. He says, quote, "I've come to say goodbye to you. My time is up." He also says, quote, "It's all over. I thought about it, about my connection to this world, and it seems that the only one I can find now is you." He tells Wujie that he's going to Changbai Mountain, and of course it takes Wujie until Qiling has already left to realize that one of Qiling's nicknames is Professional Missing Person. Because he always disappears without a trace. As in, he doesn't say goodbye. But this time, he did. So Wujie freaks out and runs after him, finally catching up as Qiling is heading up the mountain towards the Heavenly Palace. Wujie tries over and over to stop him, but Qiling is dead set on going and even threatens to do something drastic if Wujie doesn't stop following him, disappearing on him once without saying goodbye, but coming back to rescue him when Wujie gets snow-blinded and falls off a cliff into a ton of snow when he tries to go back down the mountain alone. Qiling then takes him to the hot springs, where he gives Wujie one of the 2 ghost seals and says, quote, "When you bring this thing to the bronze door, it will open. 10 years from now, if you still remember me, you can take this thing and open the door. You might see me inside." This is where Qiling tells Wujie that the Mystic Nine were supposed to be helping to guard the door that's in the Heavenly Palace to him. The one that... weirdly, Qiling already went into once and came back out of, which is kind of contradictory to this whole thing, but whatever, moving on. But because they hadn't been, it was just Zhang family members doing it, which thinned out their family quite a lot. After he tells Wujie it should be Wujie going through the door, he knocks Wujie out and is gone before Wujie wakes up. And that is the conclusion of the original series. From there, you move on to the Tibetan Sea Flower. Now, if by the time whoever's clicked on this video, if by that time Tibetan Sea Flower is already out, then you can just skip the rest of this and go ahead and watch Sand Sea. If it still isn't out and you clicked on this video and you still want the rest of what happens before Sand Sea comes along, continue watching. Side note, Chodokao dies off screen somewhere. After all that, actually, because of all these gaps, that's how many characters that die off screen, because you don't see Panza's death either on screen. But you see it in the book, whereas Chodokao, he dies off screen. He doesn't die in the book. I think that's what Qiling meant by he's finally happy when he gave him the rings I don't know what those rings were supposed to be, but apparently that made him content, and he stepped out of the picture. You don't see him again, from what I remember. And he dies off screen. Okay, Tibetan Sea Flower. In this story, Wujier is still restless and unsettled by everything, and he can't stop looking for Qiling's past, thanks to new clues showing up. Remember, at the end of all of that, Qiling went through the bronze door. He vanished. He disappeared in the hot springs, and he went inside the bronze door. And Wujier was told to wait for 10 years. Wujier travels a lot and ends up in Tibet for a while, where he finds a temple highly connected to Qiling. There's a lot of stories written down there about Qiling. Ones he told an old monk that used to live there, and it's while Wujier is there that he starts meeting people. Part of the Zhang family shows up. They pull a nasty trick on Wujier, and Fatty once he comes, first telling Wujier they'll kill him if he can't prove he's the real Wujier. They literally have like 5 heads with his face, and there's a living guy beside him with his face, and then using the bronze bells on him and Fatty. The Zhang family used the bronze bells on Wujier and Fatty, making them go through this insane nightmare. Where was I? Wujier managing to break out of the illusion on his own, but Fatty needing help. Through these testings, Wujier discovers that Hai-Kei is the living person with his face. I think Hai-Kei is the one he met near the Zhang family tomb. Hai-Kei tells Wujier and Fatty a little bit about Qiling as a kid. He only met him like twice, once when he was 4, and then when they went to the Scorpion tomb together, where 13-year-old Qiling had to save 15-year-old Hai-Kei and the other 15-year-olds that were with them, mainly because he came across so arrogantly when he said only he would survive going into the tomb, that they didn't believe him and went in anyway, and then, after they were lost and dying, discovered that Qiling was right. So they made things even worse to alert him to the fact that they were trapped, and Hai-Kei doesn't tell you exactly how he got them out, but Qiling saved all their lives. Oof, the story of the Scorpion tomb. Oof! And what you find out, like what Qiling went through as a child, what the Zhang family used him. Oh! After the testing, Hai-Kei's sister and a few others, I forget Hai-Kei's sister's name. After the testing, all of that with Wujier prove you the real Wujier and then the bronze bells, etc. Hai-Kei's sister and a few others all go with Wujier and Fatty into the mountain to find the place Qiling had been to many times, which turns out to be a hidden village that's hard to explain. And more importantly, there's a fake bronze door there. This whole story is left on a cliffhanger because the author didn't finish it. Tibetan Sea Flower, he didn't finish it, so we'll see what he does with the drama. But in the middle of it, this was also Wujier's first face-to-face and sure-of-it encounter with the Wang family. It turns out Hai-Kei's... This is a major spoiler if you haven't watched the show. If the drama is out and you haven't seen it, go and watch it, because this is a major spoiler. It turns out Hai-Kei's sister is a spy. She's actually a Wang spy, and she nearly kills Wujier. From then on, Wujier becomes so intensely focused on bringing down the Wang family for the sake of himself, the whole Wu family, and Qiling, because if he doesn't take them down, then when Qiling comes out from behind the door, nothing will have changed. His life is a target the Wang family won't stop aiming for, and what's behind the bronze door will also still be a target, since the Wang family wants it, etc., etc. And all of this is what leads to Sanxi, where Wujier has become extremely hard and mean out of necessity. Black Glasses was his teacher in terms of fighting and protecting himself, as well as helping him to discover and refine how to use a special talent that he didn't know he had, which it turns out Li Su also has, which is why it's him that gets roped so badly into Wujier's plan. And that is the gap between where Ultimate Note left you hanging and Sanxi begins. So, go and enjoy Sanxi. And after you watch Sanxi, you have to look up the story 10 years later and watch 10 years later. Because 10 years later, Sanxi ends with Wujier and Fatty going to get Qiling from behind the bronze door. 10 years later, it's a very short story, it tells the story of them going and getting Qiling back. Woo. Go read it. Go find it. Go read it. I hope you found that interesting. I hope you found that informative, and I hope from there on, if it's your choice not to read the book, if that made you interested in going to read the books, please go look up the books and read the books, because they are, I mean, wow. If you don't want to go read the books and you just want to continue on to Sansi from here, that's what this video is for, is a bridge to gap. A bridge to bridge the gap between Ultimate Note and Sansi. Go watch Sansi and enjoy.